I know many of you and several of you I do not know. I'm glad you're all here. It's a great turnout and it means a lot. I'm Jamie Jones. I teach in the English department and I'm on the Lyceum committee that worked to get CAConrad here. So I'm going to read his introduction and I'm going to talk a little bit about my impressions of CA. CAConrad has worked with the ancient technologies of poetry and ritual since 1975. They are the author of 9 books, including A Man of Paradise, Resurrect Extinct Vibration, Wave Books 2021, which won the 2022 Penn Josephine Miles Award. They received the 2022 Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize, a Creative Capital Grant, a Pew Fellowship, and a Lambda Award. They exhibit poems as art objects with recent solo shows in Spain and Portugal, and their play, The Obituary Show, was made into a film in 2022 by Augusto Casals. UK Penguin published 2 books in 2023, and a new collection of poetry is forthcoming from Wave Books in 2024, titled Listen to the Golden Boomerang Return. And I will say that some of those poems are in the current Hurricane Review, which I am the faculty editor of, which I'm glad they're there. I've been aware of CAConrad for several years. I lived in New York City from 2008 to 2010. And I was aware of CA. We really didn't know each other then. I knew who they were, and I was aware of these new things, these somatic exercises that I was hearing about, somatic rituals. And I had read bits and pieces of the poems and seen some of the rituals. I thought they were really terrific. And over the years, I've paid attention to the books. We met over email through Anna Waldman, which was great, and we've kind of been trying to make this happen since before the COVID pandemic. So I'm thrilled that it's finally happening. One thing I love about CAConrad is their commitment to poetry. And as I said in the recent Facebook post, as far as I can see, that commitment is solid, it is absolute. This person lives as a poet. Everything they do is as a poet, travels the world as a poet, and has managed to survive as a poet, which is no small feat. I'll leave you with one image that really impressed me once, and I've not told CA about this. It was at an Alice Notley reading, maybe 2009, between those years I was there, the Poetry Project, and as always, she's been here before too. She gave an amazing reading, the place was packed, and everybody was kind of just mesmerized afterwards. But as soon as she finished, CAConrad is in the front row, standing up, giving her a standing ovation and just clapping before anybody else even knew what to do, really. And I don't know, that impressed me so much. I'm thinking, I need to stand up. Alice Notley deserves this. So, without any further ado, welcome my friend, CAConrad.
Thank you. Uh-oh, is this working? Okay, it is. Thank you so much, Jamie. Hello, everybody. I'm going to start off with the Book of Frank. This is material that I wrote before I began working with the rituals. And then I want to read a little bit from this book just because this is the 30th anniversary of when I began writing it. And it's a composite of, well, I don't know. Come in. Yeah. You here for poetry? Okay, you're in the right place. Oh, I don't know. I'll just read these. So anyway, it's the 30th anniversary, and I'm doing readings. I'm doing 9 full book-length readings of this book this year. And I don't know why I agreed to do that, but I am doing it. I did one of them so far, and it was, I was like, I don't know why I agreed to do this. But I mean, it's just because it's old, you know what I mean? It's nothing it's 30 years old, much of this. But I'm grateful to this book. It has a life of its own, and this is the version that's coming out in London next month from Penguin. It's been in 9 different languages. It's been translated, and That's a big deal. I mean, I come from people who barely read, and so it's just kind of exciting to have a book that's been translated. Frank hated the 9 miscarriages kept in jars of formaldehyde. Mother burped each one, spooned peas against the glass. She rocked them all at once in her arms, no room for Frank. You are too big for a jar, my child. You will betray me the rest of your life. Father was drunk and yelling, and rule number 9, everybody dies. Upon hearing rule number 9, Frank suddenly forgot all other rules. Frank grew crows for hands. It was a difficult childhood. At dinner during prayer, his crows flapped excited in the name of the Lord. Frank, keep still, Mother hollered. Did you wash your crows? Did you wash your filthy, stinking crows? When Father died, Frank was found straddling him, his crows picking the 7 gold fillings. Frank saw a giant eat a park bench with her vagina, drink a swimming pool with her vagina. I saw her swallow the baby and spit out the crib, Frank said. He tiptoed past her snoring uterus one night and heard a few familiar voices cry out. Would you sign my book, Mr. Poe? Frank asked the pile of bones amidst shovels of dirt. Why, certainly, young man, answers Frank in a different voice. This is your captain, Frank says from the cockpit. All passengers wishing to bail out any time during our flight. It is too late. I've shredded the parachutes to confetti in celebration of our arrival. A friend of mine, one of my favorite publishing opportunities was my friend Nail. She got this as a tattoo on her shoulder. Frank knows a butterfly who wonders about her old caterpillar friends. For love, Frank spoke softly into envelopes instead of writing letters. Is no one else sick of this paralysis of gravity, Frank asks. When I was a boy, I stepped into the sky, and I was a boy, not a surrealist. Part of the dream is that you accept your waking life as part of the dream. So that all began, years before I started using these rituals. I wanted to just briefly explain why I started using the rituals. Can you all hear me just fine? I don't know. Is this microphone coming through? It's sputtering. Yeah. I don't really know how to use this kind of microphone. It's like well, I grew up in a rural part of Pennsylvania where everybody was a factory worker. And that has everything to do with this story. I didn't want to work in these factories at all. My family, they were miserable. Everybody was miserable. So I ran away as a teenager to Philadelphia. And it was great. I was doing everything I wanted to do. Of course, it was the beginning of it was like right at the very beginning of the AIDS epidemic. And I wound up losing half of everybody I knew and loved. That plays a big part in all of this as well, which I could go, to connect that would be very easy, but I just don't want to spend too much time with that part at the moment. Here's why I started using these somatic poetry rituals. I didn't have a problem with writing. I was writing the whole time. We're talking about, so I started writing in 1975. I arrived in Philadelphia in 1984. Between that time and 2005, I'm writing in the way I always, I call the old-fashioned way. You become inspired and you write. And then there was this new graduate program for writing. And I was making new friends with some of these students. And they had their writing lives and the lives they were living were connected in a way that I didn't have that connection. I wasn't sure what that was about. So I started looking into it, and I realized it was our backgrounds. They come from white-collar workers, doctors, lawyers, engineers, and I came from factory workers. And the thing about factory work, if you don't know any factory workers or didn't grow up around them, is that when they go to work, they become an extension of that machine they're working at for 10 hours. Nobody's working 8 hours anymore, 10 to 12 hours. And in order to survive working at a machine, becoming an extension of a machine for literally half the day, you have to shut the present off. You would absolutely lose your mind if you were present for your, metal machine punch, whatever the hell you're doing. My family, they make cardboard boxes, there's some ketchup packets. And so they shut the present off, but they don't know how to turn it back on. So then their brain lives in the past and the present and the future. And when I talk to them, they're either depressed about the past or anxious about the future. And there's no sense of the present ever. And when they all get together, all they do is talk about the past, or they're upset about what might be coming. There's no sense of where we are. And it's because of these jobs that they all work. And as a child, I absorbed these tools. I call them tools of survival, to be able to survive. These are coping mechanisms. So I avoided the present because I didn't know what the present was. And I realized this finally in 2005. And I began these rituals because these rituals anchor me in the present. They're very, strange things you do. The first ones that I did, I had a single color of food for a day for 7 days. And I would wear the colors well. And so for the red poem, the first poem was the red poem, I found a red wig in this beauty academy down the street from where I lived that was in the dumpster in the alley. And it was really long. And it was permed on half the side and the other side was straight. So it was like this. It was literally straight and like this. And I go to Barnes & Noble. I don't buy anything there. I don't like Barnes & Noble, but I like to use them as a library because they have all these up-to-date books. And if you go to Barnes & Noble and you go to the business section, there is a subsection called research, marketing research. And those, I refer to that as the new anthropology. These people studying our behavior and our physiology, just how our eyeballs work, everything to sell us, things we absolutely don't need. Otherwise, they wouldn't need to if they were selling food that we would need anyway. One of these articles I was reading prior to this crisis, I refer to it as a crisis, this moment where I was like, oh my God, my writing is not connected in a way that everybody else's is. I was reading in one of these books this article about research on how, as much as it's hard, I still find this hard to believe, 80 to 90% of human interaction is nonverbal. Isn't that amazing? Maybe it's old information to you. I mean, it is now, but back in 2005, my mind was blown. Like, how's that possible? So I thought, okay, how can I use this? And then I find this red wig that's like this and like this. Come in. Man. I should have a sign out there that says, just come in. So while I was walking around the city so the first day, let me just tell you about the first day of this, and then I'm going to move into these other things. That first day with that first poem, the red poem, I walked around the city eating red food and wearing this red wig, and the wig upset people, so they would walk clear around me. So I got a lot of nonverbal communication all day long. At the end of that day, I realized two things. The first was that it worked. I was present the entire time, probably the most present I'd ever been in my life writing. And then the second thing I realized was I would have never written that poem for any other reason at any other time, meaning that the rituals actually create the language. The rituals that you do with these things, they create the circumstance for the language to come out the way that it does. And of course, depending on what you eat in the morning is going to affect the art you're creating and the writing you're doing. Everything that we do is we're collaborating with everything. So it was very exciting. And I went on to do hundreds of these. And So this is Amanda Paradise, my new book. The book just prior to this is called While Standing in Line for Death. And in that book, I wanted to do something different. I knew that these rituals could do other things. And I had a boyfriend back in the 80s who was in ACT UP. Are you familiar with ACT UP? The AIDS Coalition, Unleash Power. We had so many friends dying, and he was out there. He introduced me to this activism when I was a teenager. He was a few years older than me. But he became burnt out from the experience of doing all of this work and just going to so many funerals, like 3 funerals in 1 week we went to, and he had enough. And he went to Tennessee briefly to work in a spirituals in quote marks for me, queer spiritual community. And I didn't like that he was going down there because I had visited this community, and the local people were furious that these queer people were on the side of this mountain. I mean, furious. Anyway, he found a cave to meditate in. He was doing the gardening during the day. He changed his name to Earth after all. So he was very excited about working, with growing things. And so I was on the phone with him. I was working at this queer bookstore. And he said, when you come down to visit me next month, I'll show you the cave. And then 3 days later, he's dead. And it was absolutely mind-blowing. It's just to be able to catch up with that. And even after all that all the people we saw died, just never imagined he would die. And it was so sudden. And the police told me that his death was a suicide. And then the medical examiner, his identical twin brother, comes in to where I'm working and shows me the medical examiner's report. And he was hogtied, gagged, tortured, raped, covered in gasoline, burned alive, and there was no empty gasoline container on site. You don't need forensic science. This is a murder. But the sheriff was very angry that I was very persistent. I was like, you have to tell the district attorney to invite the FBI. If you're not going to investigate, let somebody else investigate. And when he started referring to me as faggot as my name, he was kind of polite in a certain way in the beginning, and then he got angrier and angrier. And then eventually sends the Philadelphia police to my home in Philadelphia. 3 officers arrive. My mistake was walking onto the hallway. One of them grabbed me by my hair and slammed my head against the wall. One other one kicks my legs apart, and the third one's screaming in my ear to leave their brothers in blue in Tennessee alone. And that's when my depression set in. I wasn't depressed at that point. I was angry. I was going to make these people figure out who the murderers were. To this day, his death is still written up as a suicide in Tennessee. The sheriff I had to deal with back then is in prison for raping women in the jail. 3 of his deputies were fired and went to prison for shutting down meth labs and keeping the money and the drugs. And the district attorney who needed to invite the FBI was fired and disbarred for corruption. Those were the human beings I had to deal with. So it went nowhere. The Southern Law Watch Project was very helpful as best as they could. They didn't have a unit at that point for violence against LGBTQ people, but they were told me who to go to. Anyway, nothing ever worked out. There was even a documentary made about this. Nothing. So, but my depression was the problem. I was a dancer before this happened. I was very athletic, and I started gaining weight, and I gained a lot of weight. And then I did a ritual in the book While Standing in Line for Death where he gave me a crystal last time I saw him that I put under my hair wrap. Then I would swallow a smaller crystal that would extract his information. That crystal he gave me was in his pocket for almost 1.5 years. So it was absorbing all of his information, his days, his feelings. And it was exactly what I needed to do because within a week it was over. I was feeling better. It turned around very quickly. That book also has 3 political action rituals where I was doing rituals in North Carolina during the HB 2 law, the anti-trans law. And that was the only anti-trans law that existed at the time. and we got it overturned, which was amazing. But now there are a dozen laws, not bills, but laws, 150 bills, anti-queer bills being presented right now. This country is really, it's becoming so fascist so quickly. And anyway, doing these rituals was exciting though, because I'm old. I mean, I'm almost 60 now, and I'm like, I just feel so old. You're just like tired out there screaming at people and getting people throwing shit at you and spitting on you. You know, it takes a toll on you. I chose Asheville to set up camp because that's where all the big Christian universities were that were pushing this. You know, Bob Jones and Billy Graham, and they came out against us. Let me tell you, but it didn't matter. It got overturned. But one of the rituals I did, there were 3 of them that I did. One of them I took the Paul's letter to the Romans, which is where all the anger against queers comes from. You know, it comes from him, the one person who never met Jesus in the Bible. Saying that basically queers should be genocided in certain terms. So I took those 9 pages and ripped them up and put them in a blender with water and put them in suppositories and put them up my ass. Did all that. That was kind of nice. But the thing that I most enjoyed doing was I set up camp in this big part of the town where everybody was out shopping on a Saturday, all these like, you know, quasi Asheville hippies, and then all the, you know, the absolute opposite of the hippies, you know, and I had a lawn chair that was very low to the ground because I wanted to be eye level with the children. And I started blowing bubbles, and the kids would come around, and when their parents would walk over, I would look up at them and say, "These are queer bubbles. I'm going to turn your kids queer." And they would lose their minds. They would lose their minds and yank their kids away. And I would be talking with them like, "What are you worried about?" Some of them would say, "I'm sorry." I'm like, "What are you sorry about? You sorry that you're so ignorant that you can't stand here and talk to me?" You know, like, these bubbles are not magical. You know, they're just bubbles. It's soap and water and glycerin. You know what I mean? But that felt good. And I did have some conversations that were productive. I wasn't looking for productive conversations at this point because I was busy screaming at people on the street. I was looking for something that was peaceful and enjoyable, and getting the kids to ask their parents, like, what was that all about? You know what I mean? Because you're forced to talk about it then. Anyway, that book led to this one. Earth was also an environmental activist. And, you know, the thing is that the ritual I did to cure my depression from his rape and murder, I did that in this place called, in St. Peterborough, New Hampshire, called McDowell. It's an artist residency. And I was sitting on the forest floor working on this, and it had never occurred to me until that day, that he had changed his name to Earth at a time when the planet Earth was being raped, tortured, and scorched. And that's exactly how he left the planet. And when I realized that connection, I just kind of lost it for a while. But then when I calmed down, I could see this ritual. And so this is my first book-length ritual. Like, all the poems come from one ritual. And what I did was, there are 9 parts to the ritual. It's focused on this very crucial, upsetting fact from the World Wildlife Association. We've lost 70% of the wildlife on this planet in my lifetime. It's quite a ambitious thing to do that. I mean, like, how did we even do it? 70%. And that 30%, it's not like it's hanging out. I mean, that's disappearing. Alex Renter from The Guardian and newspaper in London claims that about 5 years ago, we crossed this line where there are now more incarcerated animals than wild ones. 60 billion animals incarcerated just for their flesh alone. There are only 8 billion people with 60 billion animals waiting to be slaughtered and eaten. Then there's zoos, you know, there's so many, there's all these animals that are like, during COVID, everybody's like, all the news people are like, oh, look at all the wild animals in the streets in Wales and Scotland and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, but it's only 30% of what we had, so they didn't want to talk about that. So what I did was I downloaded from the internet all of these recordings that I could find of animals, because all the ornithologists, mammalogists, even entomologists, you know, there are insects that have been disappearing as well. As the birds disappear, like, everything's all out of sync now. And I would travel around the United States. I got a creative capital grant, which I'm very grateful for because I would probably still be writing this book. I went to all 50 states to write it. I would lie down on the grass on this blanket. That's a quote from a manifesto I wrote. I really don't like manifestos, but I wanted to write a manifesto that was against manifestos, basically. And it's called the Right to Manifest Manifesto. And this is something I say in it at one point. I'm like, we must return this world to its seismic levels of wildness. And I would flood my body with the field recordings of these animals, starting at my feet, moving the speakers up my body. It was amazing. I felt euphoric when I would do this. Let me read just a few of these poems from this book. Golden in the morning crane our necks. In a past life, I was a little fish who cleaned the shells of turtles. A dream helped me remember their deep voice of thanks. Many nights I heard sharks waiting for the tide to draw me near. When the calendar runs out, it feels lucky another awaits. All I have ever wanted was to forge the English language into a spear and drive it into my heart. Between leaping and being shoved, no lonelier place to put my faith for the swinging motion inside the dance we share. Don the extraordinary suit for this ordinary day. Take our time studying trees to imagine the nest we would build if we were birds. I ask all you talented people spending many creative hours perfecting killer drones, guns, and bombs to please know we are waiting for you on the other side of art in the no-kill zone. One of the other things I did was I built this crystal grid in the middle of the country. So the city of my birth is in the middle of it, Topeka, Kansas. I went to Minneapolis, and I had these copper Ayurvedic medicinal copper water bottles that I used. Copper is highly conductive, so that's what I was looking for. I filled them with equal amounts of amethyst, carnelian, and rose quartz, and then water, leaving about an inch for freezing. I buried one in Minneapolis, which is a very American word. It's the Lakota word for water infused with the Greek word for city. So you get Water City, Minneapolis. And then I chose Memphis, Tennessee, because it's named after the much fabled ancient city of Memphis, Egypt. Memphis, Tennessee is named after Memphis, Egypt. And Memphis, Egypt in ancient times, this is what has been written by some people, that there were ceremonial magicians who would do work. It was right at the mouth of the Nile, like this powerful force of the Nile River. And they would send that energy due west to Giza, where the pyramids were, which I don't know exactly how many miles. I find that really interesting, like an homage to Memphis, Egypt. And then I went to Cheyenne, Wyoming to complete the grid. Well, actually, then there's the seed of the grid. I buried 4 of them, but the third one that made the perimeter of the grid is in Cheyenne because the person who introduced me to crystals when I was a teenager in Philadelphia was this trans woman named Peppy, who was about 20 years older. And Peppy was really amazing at helping all. I mean, oh my God, my friends and I were freaked out all the time. Everybody was convinced we were all dying. The older queers were saying everybody needs to, plan their funeral. I mean, everybody, I was 19 and everybody I knew, 19, 20, we were all planning funerals. We talked about our funerals all the time. And Peppy started giving me crystals. She was the first one, and then showed me how to work with them. Very strange things we would do. But Peppy was Native American. And she had she said her parents told her this story that crystals inhale for 50 years and then they exhale for 50 years. She's trying to invent up this crystals gave me was inhaling or exhaling. I don't know what we found out anymore. It's so long ago. But the way we would do it is we would be naked with our backs touching. And she had this beautiful tattoo of the Eye of Horus on her back. And I had a dream that night that she had pressed so hard that the tattoo branded my back. It was kind of a beautiful dream. Anyway, I chose Cheyenne, Wyoming because Peppy had a sister who lived in Cheyenne and she wanted to visit before she died, but she died of AIDS and didn't get to visit. So that's why that's there. And then the seat of the grid is in Omaha, Nebraska, right in the center. So so it took me months to set this up. And then when I'd be traveling across the country, I would always try to go to Omaha to sit on that grid. And I would sit on it, and with a compass, I would align myself with Minneapolis first, and then I would eat a little bit of dirt from the Minneapolis location that I brought with me, and listen to an ambient recording of, the birds, the traffic, the wind. Then I would start writing. Then I would go Deasil, clockwise, with the sun. Memphis, Cheyenne, and then do it 2 more times. I loved it. By the 3rd time is when most of the notes came for the poems. This poem is called On All Fours, I Am a Seat for the Wind. Most of my family's international travel is being sent to war. If we judge love, we can kill off anything. Drag by our hair across the days until they make their way inside our dreams where we get to evict them. I want to thank the one who invented knocking on the door, but no one remembers their name to tattoo across my knuckles. I asked an archaeologist about first time she stuck a shovel in the ground. Her answer had same restorative powers as the gravediggers. When we die, we can no longer wipe the muck off. Just lie there, becoming shit of the world. Eat a chip of your own dried blood. Join me in the cannibal sunshine, fully persuaded by the world through song. Each morning, a blue jay screams at the edge of the clear-cut forest. I scream with her at the bleeding stumps. Scream inside something borrowed, like ocean, like skin. I want to see before I die a mink wearing a human scarf, skin from a handsome hairy leg. Meow. Acclimating to discomfort of the system breaking beneath us. I do not take any calls except from the century we are in. When there is no Bible in my hotel room, it makes me sad to have no place to put my filthy poems for future guests. It is important to let them know everyone should burn with abandon as soon as the heat is available. Be a self-timed alarm clock no one can shut off. Be the storm love places in someone's home. Are you sure we can handle this? Because I am absolutely certain. Come on, wind, knock us around. We are a tide that cures ills. Look at us in the mirror. As soon as the invented language enters us, something else will vibrate in our skin, opening doors with teeth of the future to the place where we let the freer feeling go. When you told me you had been looking for me, we pressed through every invisible barrier between us. I watched you gently let the gods know you were ready to win the lottery. There were people from the 19th century alive in my lifetime, many years ago. I met some of them. They are all gone now, as we hold on to the side of one another, howling down the velocity of seconds. So working with the extinct animals led me to this. This is the work that I just finished. Listen to the Golden Boomerang Return. The title of this book comes from a poem in the book, but the poem in the book, which I'll be reading in a couple of minutes, comes from a dream. And the dream that I had was I threw a boomerang. I'm fascinated by those tools, and it was spinning in the air, like just in place, in the distance ahead of me, and it wasn't stopping. But it was turning golden because the sun was either setting or rising. I couldn't tell whether the sun was rising or setting at first, but there was a tree that I knew very well because I love trees. And there are so many trees in this country that when I visit a city, I have to go see this particular tree. They're like friends, And once I realized that it was the sunrise, not the sunset, it returned to my hand immediately and was really smooth and hot. And it made so much sense to me because I believe very strongly that we're being whispered to all the time by spirits to do our art. You know, the poet Jack Spicer called it dictation. And I believe that's the case for my poems. And so whoever's whispering to me, I'm especially open to it in the morning when I wake up. So I like that it was the sunrise. So the last book, Command of Paradise, was all about extinction. I wanted to write a book about working with animals who are thriving in the Anthropocene, creatures who have found a way to negotiate the violence of this Anthropocene that we're in, this human-dominated world. So I spent most of COVID lockdown in Seattle, Washington. And I don't know if you're familiar with Seattle, but it has one of the largest populations of crows on the planet. There's so many crows. It's a very lush, amazing, non-tropical rainforest, which I really had to get used to because, I don't know. It rained for 150 days without stop while I was there. 150, I'm not even kidding. And, but the crows they run the city. They absolutely run the city. They don't care what any human being thinks. There was a neighbor. My grandmother in Iowa always told me that the reason scarecrows existed was because there were always more than one crow. If you kill a crow, the surviving crow is going to tell all the others, and they're just going to destroy your crops. They're very smart. I started feeding the crows on the ledge. So that's Elliott Bay behind the crow, which then over here where the inlet to the Pacific Ocean. But it was lovely being up there, seeing whales and all that. But over here, there was another apartment. And the man living over there, the crows would be on his balcony in the morning having a conversation. It's their city. Why not? And he would come out with a broom and swat at them. And those crows would dive bomb him when he went out to his car. Yeah, he deserved it. Crow justice is real in Seattle. There were cats. Cats are absolutely terrorized in that city. There was a cat, this tabby cat. I was just like running in terror from tree trunk to tree trunk with the crows following over, just screaming at it. Just like, I'm going to kill you, cat. Just constantly screaming at this cat. I started feeding the crows all day long. And there were groups of crows that would come throughout the day. And this crow eventually allowed me to hand them food. And then they one day sort of lowered their head and let me pet their beak, which was amazing. And then they started bringing me gifts. And that's what the lower photograph is. The first gift, let's see if I can make this a little bigger. Is that better? The first gift is a twig, as you can see. With that first gift, I thought, I don't know, maybe I've been up here for too long, This is really not a gift for me, you know what I mean? It's just, I just was trying to talk myself out of it. But it would sit it down, tap the glass, pick it up and shake it. Sit it down, tap the glass, pick it up, shake it. Well, I was trying to convince myself I was making it up. The second gift, this little piece of translucent plastic, this nub of plastic, when that came, I was like, this is real. This is a decision, this piece of plastic. They were like, I know exactly who's going to like this. And they were right. I did like it. And 3 is this berry. 4, 5, 6, and 7 are a type of seed they thought I needed a lot of. And then 8 is a linden tree seed. A 9 is a piece of bark. The linden trees are definitely not native to Seattle. But pine trees are, because this is a forest. It just goes on for hundreds and hundreds of miles of pine trees. 10 was very difficult for them to let go of because it's a piece of cat food. And they're really happy about this cat food. And I was like, I'm vegan, I don't want it. But they left it. It was like they put it down, look at it with one eye, pick it up, look with the other eye. And finally they left it for me for a peanut. And then 11 is this beautiful it looked like a little bouquet in their tip of their beak. But 12 is this piece of gold foil. You can't really see it on here, but there's the teacher must have drawn like a star on the gold for somebody's, good grade or something? I'm sorry, what's that? Oh. Oh. Oh, it's okay. It wasn't bothering me. But I hear it now. But the thing about this gold foil coming to me, the night of the first gift, I had a dream that the crow brought me gold. But it was a big piece of like rectangular gold foil. Anyway, it came on the 12th. That was really lovely. Uh-oh. Yeah, it's just like the 12 Days of Christmas. So I'm a Capricorn, meaning that we're really good being alone. We don't care. A COVID lockdown was fine for us, you know. All my Pisces friends were like, I had to talk them off the ledge on the phone constantly. Say, do something. You write poems. Why are you not writing? Produce something. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to be at this for a while. We were like, oh no, it's just a couple of months. I was like, I don't believe that. And, but anyway, after COVID lockdown, I got into this residency program in Joshua Tree. So I drove right to being alone again for a couple more months. And they knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to feed the animals. So I was feeding coyotes. But when I was down in Joshua Tree is when I started doing a different kind of, with the crows, I was dreaming with them. I would break peanut shells in half and they would eat half of them in the evening. And then these crows, these like teenage, like wolf pack crows that would come in the evening. They were rowdy, screaming, and they would eat these peanuts and sit in the roost in the trees across the street with their beaks pointed toward the twinkling lights of the city. So I would position my bed so that I could watch the lights with them. I would eat half of those peanuts, they would eat the other half, and then we would dream together. And the dreams were phenomenal. But I went to Joshua Tree. I decided to switch the ritual up a little bit, and I started embodying the creatures. When the coyotes surrounded the house at night in the desert, I would rub the back of my ears vigorously, so it was like almost like a rug burn. So while I was writing it, it was like a residual haunting, like I could still feel it. The quail, every creature had a part of my body. The roadrunner was the most aggressive creature I had to deal with. You know, you think the coyotes, but no. This is the greater roadrunner. I mean, these roadrunners in the Mojave Desert are the largest ones, and they're massive. And they were eating everybody that I was feeding. You know, they were murdering birds and chipmunks, and then I rescued one of the chipmunks, and it came at me. And I had to close the glass door, and it was banging. It was really angry at me because I took its lunch. But the creature on the bottom, that's the creature I really went down there to work with. That's the kangaroo rat. The kangaroo rat only lives in the Mojave Desert. It has evolved these massive hindquarters, and it's got the little T-Rex front paws to hold a seed and eat. Notice the tail. You can't really see the end of the tail. It goes away. It's really long. The tails are designed so that when they're in midair, jumping out of the jaws of a rattlesnake, if they see another rattlesnake, they can move their tail like a rudder to change the direction where they're going to land in midair. I'd watch them do it all the time, especially when there were 4 or 5 of them at the same time. They'd get nervous and they'd be changing their tails. And it was kind of amazing watching them, eating seeds with them. But they received my left nipple because I had a dream that I was breastfeeding a kangaroo rat. And my mother was in the dream. She was really freaked out that I was breastfeeding this creature. And yeah, anyway, of course she was. You know, what are you doing? Oh, and then I have this issue in the art world where poets are the ugly cousin of the art world. And so, I mean, I'm not mean. I politely say no. But I say no when I'm invited to read at openings and stuff. And they're like, well, why? And I said, because I'm not here for you, you know. And if it's a group show, I'll say, I want to be in the show. They're like, well, what does that mean? I said, I want you to put my poem on the wall, 6 feet high. And sometimes they'll say yes, and they'll do it. Poets just need to be a little more, you know. When you're in the ugly cousin of the art world, what do you have to lose, you know? But this is I talked my way into the macro in Rome and to live in the museum. I lived in this museum for 11 days. I got to be with the artwork in the middle of the night. And But the thing I most enjoyed was every morning going to feed the rats and the pigeons at the fountains. And that's a really weird way I have that. It almost looks like the giant rats are under the pigeons' feet, but it's two separate photographs. The rats of Rome are not at all like the rats I'm used to. Their colorings are very different. They're socialized in a way that I wasn't used to. They would put their little feet on the edges of my shoes, because I'd be sitting against the fountain, my shoes up, smelling my berries and stuff. And there was a woman, she was probably in her 80s, who was also feeding the rats. And she was like, oh, the police, like, ooh, we'll go to jail. You're not supposed to feed the rats. So I would look out for her. She would look out for, we were doing this like lookout, rat patrol. And I haven't lived anywhere for over a decade. And then I got this job teaching for a while in Massachusetts. So I'm living in Greenfield, Massachusetts at the moment. And these are the squirrels I was working with. There's a red squirrel and a gray squirrel. And then there's a chipmunk I was feeding and a woodchuck. And this woodchuck would see me pull my car up to this meadow and just come, just really just so happy to see me. They love cilantro. We would eat a salad together. I don't know, that picture's weird. It looks like he's got a cigarette in his hand. Yeah, so there I've got 2 books coming out next month in London. There's the Book of Frank reprint, and then this selection of rituals, which includes some of the new ones I'm about to read. You Don't Have What It Takes to Be My Nemesis is a different ritual that I did. Dealing with all these bastard poets who would be like, the thing is, I started writing in 1975. From 1975 to 2006, I have no book. My first book doesn't come out to 2000. So that's like decades of a long train ride to get published, And you gotta love poetry. If you're in it for, God forbid, money or publication, you just will probably quit. 'Cause I think 95% of every poet I've ever met quits. Almost every poet I've ever met quits. Almost every one of them. It's just too much. They all want to write novels after a while, I've got no interest in that. But the thing is, once I started being published and winning awards, the knives came out. People I knew for decades, just horrible shit they would do to me. Sabotage things. So I wrote a ritual to purge myself of these evil poets. It was a good ritual. And it's called You Don't Have What It Takes to Be My Nemesis. So this is the show that I did last year in Santander, Spain. And then there's an exhibit that it's going up on the 15th of just a couple days from now in Miami at the Deering Estate. And this is about 12 feet long and 8 feet high, something like that. And, or maybe 9 feet. Yeah, it's something like that. And it's against the wall. And these are poems I'm going to be reading in a few minutes. And I create this sort of digital grass. I have these landscapes now with the poems where they look like they're conversing. But I have a show coming out next month in Portugal, and that's very different. And they said, well, how do you want to do this show? And I said, well, I don't know how you feel about this, but I was in a 7-Eleven. I had to explain what that was to them. And there was some NASCAR race drivers, cardboard cutout, like 6 feet tall, You know what I'm talking about. Standing next to a giant pyramid of Mountain Dew. So I looked at the back and I found this web, the name of the company. And I wrote to them and I said, could you make these for anything? They said, well, yeah, of course, So that's what we're doing. We're making a bunch of these giant, various from 4 to 9 feet. And so they'll be all over the gallery. And then there will be other things as well. But I'm excited about that. Okay, I'm going to end by reading a selection from the new book. It'll be out next spring from Wave Books. Again, these are the rituals dealing with animals that are alive and well. But I'm constantly thinking about, I didn't mention this, but Amanda Paradise, AIDS comes up continuously because of COVID lockdown, because half those are in there. And there's a lot about AIDS in this book, but just not the ones that I'm reading today. Our first lightning strike was convulsive. We felt sad for our violence after exterminating wolves and bison. We do not need a doctor to say, dance, dance, dance before the song runs out. Learn how to live so wilderness never becomes mythology. We put them in parks to be wild on purpose, a museum of fur, fangs, and hooves. Part of this forest tastes like the man I love, with an actual number of nails holding the bedroom together. Other days when we died where we fell, we became the forest. My car never intended to be a meat grinder, another face going under the waves. We felt awful after hitting the deer. We made love and slept with one of his antlers between us. To desire the world as it is, not as it was. Falling feather attaches to new life. For a moment, when the hammer approached, we thought, is that thing coming this way? We are the fractal. Drop to hear our own harmonics and the muffled underground hum of seeds. You can all see those, right? Yeah. Remember our metal skin when the planet first caught fire. It was years before we understood the awful thing we held to our chest. Whatever a poem can send into the future, please send the breath we've been trying to catch for as long as you can hold it. So glad you came by. Thank you, as always. Thumbing through calendars of the future till touching a year out of reach. Me a ghost, you a ghost. Another poem dedicated to the great vanishing trick. We build muscles, organs, bones at separate tables of our favorite restaurant, chewing to motion kept to the tides. We stopped studying the night sky for directions. If someone said, we made it up, planet Earth isn't real, we would try to verify, try to be sure. Critics are the evidence we do not trust ourselves. Your imagination is asking for parole. What is your verdict, Warden? Try to always remember the calendar made of light our ancestors followed to pass the year. The hill appeared in many dreams, never sure if it was real. Melville aimed his gun at the transcendentalists and named it Bartleby. We can prepare our shadows to be chewed apart or not, but the chewing will commence. I saw a spider eat a fly. I saw a praying mantis eat the spider. I did not mean to see these things. The spider caught my eye. Then the spider was gone into the green body. We begin to discern waning time as seasons through our organs. I had a professor who was a huge fan of the transcendentalists, and I mean, I think they're all right. But I've got big issues with them, but you know, they're all right, I guess. But I wrote this paper on how Bartleby, you know Bartleby the Scrivener by Herman Melville? I would prefer not to. I feel like that was his answer. He hated them. You know, this is a man who worked on Wall Street. Herman Melville worked on Wall Street, right? And he wanted to work with men writing about whales. You know, he's like, these guys, you know, these nonconformists, they're children. So Bartleby eventually just becomes, he's in the fetal position eating ginger snaps at the end of the story. He's basically saying, you want to be a nonconformist, then just die. It was really brutal, Herman Melville. But I think I was right about it. My professor lost his mind. He was so angry at me. I still think I'm right, though. Our little places within are not dungeons, remember. Astronomers point satellites into space. The military points them down at us. The inverse relationship between love we offer and what we give. This on and off button is another opportunity to believe there are only two choices. This too must end. A shotgun above every door where I grew up. I did not mean to get her ashes on my shoes. I will wait to walk in the rain, refusing to exert the stress of time. Everyone envied everyone's shotgun behind their backs. Our favorite game when I was a baby was to throw me off the roof, then run downstairs to catch me. Oh, how we laughed. A lion meddling with mechanics of my throat. Hooks in, hooks out, eyes right, heart writes, liver writes a little more. Then I lift the pen, prepare for their answers. When speaking with the dead, listen to the golden boomerang return. Do you like your species is my latest questionnaire. Meet me at the quarry where Michelangelo conjured David. Falling is felt all over the body the next day. Imagine trees hurting on the forest floor. Our every cell singing the ghost of we shall rise again. If you call this planet evil one more time, I will have to learn to hold you better. Refrigerators are where we keep our bodies before they become our bodies, spinning inside routines this living provides. We sense language travel on our constant breath. Open a friend's refrigerator to yell, "Hello, future friend." Human beings are a symptom of the Big Bang. Gun stores fill with shoppers. Bombs mark the sky with our pledge. Everything falls with the tree. Something about the man in the pin holding the butterfly down. Dear reluctant sleeper, we are supposed to be used to sleep by now. Each night, we question where we are going, why we have to go, our planet much lighter with every astronaut shot into space, jolted alive in the catapult of ritual. It is a lot of work, but we roll the world's barbed wire into one ball. Stretched between cell phone tower and the forest is how I feel. If I do not touch the sea, there is no way back. Grandma said lucky was an option. Victory of water over knife slicing the endless healing surface. Please walk with me to look where the photographer pointed the camera a second ago. Don't worry. Darkness always accuses us of falling on purpose. You know how to bulldoze me back up these hills. What does darkness know of light filling your navel in the middle of the afternoon? We have not lost our place in line, shaking off the cold. Let's get this garden planted. Give our fruit away to one another. Thank you. Well, the first poet who inspired me was Emily Dickinson. My mother was in trouble with the law a lot when I was a child in the 70s, so she couldn't get work. So she put me to work when I turned 8, selling bouquets of flowers along the highway. And then that was all week, so like Friday after school till dusk, Saturday all day long, most of Sunday. It was a lot for a little kid to be isolated along the highway. There's nothing around but cornfields and a toll booth across the street from the turnpike exit. So every Thursday I would go to the library and check out a big stack of books. You know, thing is that those years working for my mother, it was 8 years, from 8 to 16, turned me into a reader, and nobody was reading where I grew up. Everybody where I grew up. In fact, when I went to Philadelphia and new friends had like bookshelves in their houses, I was like, where do you get bookshelves? That's just for libraries, right? You know, it was very confusing. Everybody just had a Bible and a TV guide where I grew up. And it was just so exciting. This one day, I know exactly when it was. It was the next year, and it was 1975, and it was Easter Sunday, because Easter was a big time for selling flowers. And there was That's why I remember this particular time. And there was a copy of Emily Dickinson's poetry where you check out your books. And the librarian said, have you ever read Emily Dickinson? And I said, I have no idea who that is. And I put it in my pile. And I didn't really want to read. I had no interest. But it was the last book. And Easter Sunday. So I started reading it, and I was just hooked immediately. And I started writing almost as soon as it came as quickly as reading. And it just sort of opened up the gates for me. But many others, so Emily Dickinson, Alice Notley, Audre Lorde, Eileen Myles. Yeah, there are so many poets. And there's so many great poets writing right now that are alive. It's exciting. But the courses I took, didn't really like any of those. Yeah. No, the one thing about being a Capricorn that's really good for art is that we don't listen to others. And there were so many old men when I was a teenager that would be like, they would say this ridiculous thing. They would say, wine loosens the tongue, meaning you can write better. I was like, yeah, and you're an alcoholic. Why am I listening to you? It's ridiculous to tell a teenager that, And so I was like, I'm not listening to you. You're a mess. And then everybody was always giving you unsolicited advice, and I listened to none of it. If I'd listened to any of it, I wouldn't be sitting here, just doing what they told me to do. And the thing is, when I teach workshops, I'm only teaching process. I'm teaching the rituals. I'm not telling you how to write. You want to write a sonnet? Fine, great. Write whatever you want to write. But I'm not interested in dictating aesthetic. I find that useless and boring and mean to be trying to forge people into I had a long correspondence with this poet, Sid Corman, who lived in Kyoto, Japan. And he was, when the Book of Frank, when I was writing that, I was sent him some of those, and he was writing these letters, was saying you're destroying yourself, writing these surrealism is for children. You need to write, I was just like, I don't care. And I read it to Jonathan Williams, who was one of the last Black Mountain College poets, who was going to publish the Book of Frank, but then he passed away, and then Wave Books picked it up. And he was a student of Charles Olson's, and I was always bothered by my questions about Olson. He was so sick of hearing about Olson. He was in his 80s at this point when I'm asking him these questions. But I read him this letter, because I was down there to work on this book, from Sid Corman. I was like, look what Sid Corman says. He's like, and he didn't like Sid Corman as it was. So he said, Sid Corman, one of those poets who wants you to write just like him, only not as well. I realized that really was what was going on. Are there any other questions? Yes.
Being an older person who identifies as queer, I think I speak for a lot of the younger folks in this room when we say that there are a lot of events happening politically, socially in the world right now that are very troubling and very scary. So you having survived, decades of history of what's happened in LGBT history, what would you say to some younger queer folks who are closeted or just scared in general about how the world is going at the moment?
Well, I was, when I was younger, I was part of Queer Nation and all that, and we were always about outing people, and because we felt very desperate. But I wouldn't do that now. I think that when people are in the closet, there's a really good reason for it. I had a boyfriend who was raped and murdered, so I'm all for being in the closet if you need to be, especially right now. It's just completely out of control. The advice I have is that you need your friends. You absolutely need your community. You need to make that community. A lot of younger people now, their parents are much more open, or whatever the word is to use, and which is nice, I guess. That's pretty great. But one of the things I've noticed that's troubling is that just a few, it's not like a problem, but I've noticed with a few people I've met that they take on all of their, it's almost I did this reading in this town. It was this gay I don't know, like a sports bar or something. And the owner invited me, his parents came, and he had not met me in person before then. And he was really outraged. He was like, "Oh, you're trans?" And he's like, "Oh, well, I don't know how I feel about that." I was like, "I don't really care how you feel about it." And his parents were standing there, and he says, "Well, my parents love and respect me." And, I was like, what does that have to do with me? I don't care whether your parents respect you or not. You know what I mean? That's not my problem. You know what I mean? But the thing is, he was like taking on all their prejudices, and it made him, to keep that love from his parents. It's like, well, they hate trans people, so maybe if I hate trans people, I'll get to keep this love. It's this idea of like negotiating all of that stuff. It's like, you can't remove the T from LGBTQ. And it's not your right to do that. I was fighting constantly in the 80s with the older gay and lesbian, people who were always like, well, when we get rights, then we'll, work for our community, then we'll work with, on trans issues. I'm like, we are the community. What are you talking about when with the community? Like, you can't leave us out. But they did. And, I had a boyfriend who died of AIDS. And when he was dying, I was like, what do you, it's like, you're leaving us here with all these, like, conservative gay guys who are going to get us all to vote Republican and get married and all that. And it's exactly what happened, it seemed. But I think that I know things are really rough right now, but it's also a beautiful time. I think that, I don't want to sound like, being reactionary to all that, everything that's going on against us in this country in particular. But I feel like, I created this gender neutral name in 1984. It was not very welcome back then. And it blew my mind to have somebody, I don't know when like a decade ago, being like, what's your pronoun? I was like, I can't believe somebody just asked me that. And because it was extremely unwelcome back then. And I think it's great. I love the whole, like, ask me your tell me, I'll tell you my pronoun, you tell me. I think that's a great thing. And it's silly how upsetting it is for some people to deal with that. We just have things to work on, I guess. Yeah, you just have to keep everybody to not give up, The word hope, I know we like to use the word hope, but I have to say the word hope is, it's about, you don't hope for the present, you hope for the future. And the future is a fiction, it's not here yet, So it's like, I don't know, I'd rather I just find that word hope can be very mean sometimes. It's like, you're like, if you hope too much, then you're not going to do anything. You're just hoping. It's like being in the present means like doing something, action. And you can't live without hope. It's impossible to live. I just can't imagine living without hope. But I feel like we're becoming really hopeful these days. And I feel like that's a little dangerous. We just have to make our life, no matter what's coming, make our lives what we want them to be. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
So you mix rituals and your spirituality in your writing, and I'm a little bit spiritual myself. I like to meditate, and I was wondering how you found words for nonverbal sensations.
How I found words for nonverbal sensations. Nobody's ever asked me that. Well, I do a lot of work with the senses, braiding them. Like, one of the rituals I like to do is to train okay, so what I do is I'll take a water pitcher and a clear glass, and I'll mark the center of that glass with a Sharpie pen. And then I will put my ear close to the glass while I'm watching myself pour to that line 3 times. The 4th time I close my eyes. It's all you need to do to train your ears to do your eyes' work. There's so many things you can do with this, but that leads to your answering your question. Like, that's where all that language can come from.
Okay.
Relying on the senses to be bigger than you think they are.
Right. That makes sense. Thank you.
We're much bigger than we imagine ourselves to be often. So.
I had a question, just out of curiosity. So what's your gripe with transcendentalism?
Oh, I mean, it's great, in many ways. Like I said, it's not a major problem I have. It's just, I don't know, there's so much lying. It's like, Walden, that book by Thoreau, it's nice, I guess. I believed it when I read it until I started reading the letters associated around it. And it was like all lies. It's like, oh, I'm out here in the No, he wasn't. His fiance and his mother were bringing picnic lunch every day. He was borrowing somebody's axe, to chop wood. Like, you were not out there on your own. You were constantly meeting people and hanging out with people. It was just all made up. But he just erases all that. I find that really irritating. And I feel like Emerson was just bossy all the time. Irritatingly bossy. And Walt Whitman, and I have real issues with Walt Whitman, I wrote a whole essay about it, and I still get hate mail from this essay. And well, the thing is, you have to think about the fact that Walt Whitman took a long time to. So people would say, "Isn't it great he would write this book over and over again?" I was like, "No, he did it to form himself into the great grandfather poet, so everybody would love him." So if you look at the unexpurgated text, the original Leaves of Grass, is filled with queer sex and all this. It all gets erased. That's what it is. He's erasing his queerness to be able to be given to kids. But that's not the real issue I have with him. That's just annoying. The real issue I have with him is extraordinary racism. The thing is, this man's poems, if you read his poems, so like, I sing the body electric. It's all this like, oh, we're all human beings together. Yeah, that's nice until you read the prose. When you start reading the prose, if you haven't read the prose, it's going to upset you. Like he was reading Darwin incorrectly, like Hitler. And he started writing things like, these freed slaves should never be allowed to vote for the president because they have the brains of monkeys. He was literally saying these things. And Trebell, his biographer, who lived with him the last 3 years of his life, filled the biography with all these kind of awful quotes. And the thing, and this was published by the Poetry Foundation website, the largest poetry magazine in the world. So people all over the world were reading this, and the hate mail would just pour in, especially Americans. They were like, the main argument people gave me was, I saw this so many times I lost track. They would say, well, clearly you don't understand the 19th century American mindset. I said, oh, okay. So you're saying that if most people believe that, people of a certain color should be enslaved, that it's okay to say these things? Let's just jump a couple of decades in the future after this man's death, when Adolf Hitler is building the death camps in Poland. Are you going to excuse the Holocaust because it follows your line of thinking? He was voted into office by a popular vote, unlike Trump, And that platform he campaigned on was anti-Semitism. So are you going to say that? And then, of course, they freak out and they don't want to admit that. But I was just endless, these things. People were writing to my publisher saying they shouldn't publish me anymore. And people would show up to readings and heckle me. And I would just talk to them. And they would storm out. And I was like, well, now I can read my poems, But yeah, this anger about, and everybody wants to feel cozy in his beard with all his bits of food or whatever's in there, And I'm like, don't buy it. I just don't buy it. And also, this is like bullshit, this 19th century mind. They were abolitionists. These were people who, white people who didn't believe in slavery. No, I don't agree with that whole idea. I think it's nonsense. And, the things he wrote are really vicious and crazy. And not only that, he does have one poem that really goes into it. He got rid of all that in the poetry. He leaves all this out in the poetry, you see. But he's got a poem called "O Pioneers, O Pioneers." This man read 3 newspapers a day. So I did the research before I wrote this article, make sure I knew what I was talking about. And it is a fact that he's talking about the Sand Creek Hill Massacre, where the white cavalry murders all these Arapaho and Cheyenne warriors. It's called the Sand Creek Massacre. And in that poem, he says, you know, we are Colorado men. Are your axes sharpened? Are your guns loaded? It's all about genocide. I believe Wild Women was this country's campaign ad for Manifest Destiny. Going and shitting our claw and clawing our way across this country, just murdering everybody who stood in our way. That's what I think he was doing. He didn't care. He really felt like Native Americans and Black people were beneath him. He would even say, like, their genes will not exist soon. Like, it's just these crazy things. Anyway, I could go on and on and on about how much I dislike Whitman. I don't trust the poems anymore, so. Does anybody else have a question? Yes.
With your somatic exercises, what's your favorite?
Well, I really missed the one that I just finished, working with animals, because I turned that manuscript in. That was great, working with these animals in person. As opposed to working with all the dead animals, you know, the extinct animals, even though that was kind of beautiful at times. But the one that I'm working on now, I'm really excited about, where I watch the sunrise, and then some point during the day, it's different times during the day, I research all these public outdoor webcams to watch sunrises in India or Africa, all over the world. You can see the sunrise all day long. So I've been doing that and writing, and I'm getting ready to stitch all those together to watch the sunrise 24 hours nonstop on the webcams. And then as soon as that's finished, I'm not interested in extreme sports. It's just, you know, I want to just see the sunrise, you know, all day long. And then after that's finished, I'm going to go to the doctor's office and be hypnotized to remember the first time I saw sunlight as a child. We'll see if that works. That's something I'm working on now. The Tokyo, the website and the webcam in Tokyo is one of my favorites. It's at the rail yards at the edge of the city, and when the sun rises, it just floods all those glass buildings with the light. And the other thing I like about the one in Tokyo is it's got the best microphone of any of them that I've ever found. You can hear people whisper almost. I don't know. You can see when you look at the webcam how far away the people are from the the sidewalk is, but you can hear everything they're saying. I bet they don't know that. No, but there's so many of them I don't even know how to answer. I'm just like the ones that I'm doing.
How do you come up with the somatic exercises, or do you just find them?
Well, it's funny you say that because I think it's the same process with the whispering in the ear, because I received a residency, or I don't know what you would call it, from Madison Square Garden Park, not where the comedian, not the hall, but the actual park in Midtown Manhattan. It was in July, and they wanted me to be in the park all day long, and it was really hot, and they wanted me to do readings. I was like, I'm not going to. So polluted this air. I'm not reading poems outside every day here. I'll lose my voice. They said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, they wanted to build stages and stuff. I said, I just want a little table, a card table, and 2 chairs. And they're like, well, why? And I said, I just want to create personalized rituals for people. And I made a little pamphlet to hand out to people to explain like how to do the ritual. So I could, because I only had about 10 to 15 minutes with each person, because the New York Times mentioned I was doing it, and then it was mobbed. But there's one person I think about a lot. Her name was Doris, and she was a little bit older than I am, and half of her head was shaved because she had a scar. She had brain cancer, and her doctor said that she would not make it, and she would be dead by Halloween. And she saw that I was doing this, and her daughter had come home from grad school from Portland, Oregon to help her die. And she wanted to write a poem for her. And I said, well, okay, Doris, what have you been doing in your life? Because I only knew this woman for 15 minutes, but I think about her. And she did die. But she says, well, I was a technical drawer, which I think is kind of almost obsolete now with computers. But she would draw diagrams and things, for textbooks and engineers. I said, great, that's going to be your ritual. She was very excited because she missed her job. I said, I want you to go home, call up, because she was about to, 3 weeks from when she met me, she was about to have some kind of experimental surgery to relieve suffering, but it wasn't going to save her life, and she was very disturbed about this surgery. And I said, okay, go home, call the doctor's office, and ask them about every single thing used in the surgery, the scalpels, whatever it is, face masks, cotton balls, I don't know, whatever it is. And then you're going to make drawings of each of these things. Then you're going to treat those drawings. You're going to vomit on them, shit on them, bleed on them. She's doing all these things every day. Some of them you're going to chop them up and cook them and eat them with, rice and stuff. And, oh, is that what that means? So anyway, that's an example.
Thank you.
Well, I thought Doris was coming to see us.
Yeah, that was very interesting. That was really exciting. Thank you, everybody.